and this is just some tips about, how to recognize leadership potential. Are these people looking for ways to improve things? Do they see a challenge and not a problem? Do they readily accept responsibility with the persistence to see something through to the end? Do they encourage, are they a cheerleader? Do they encourage the people around them? Are they well respected by their peers? Is it a self-starter? Do they take initiative? Have they demonstrated leadership in the past? And you're not going to know all that. You're going to have to do some asking around and figuring out who those people are. But even in a community situation, it's like, who takes charge? You get a group of people that comes to a community garden, or they come out to some kind of event, and all of a sudden there's somebody who's kind of taking charge of what's happening. Sometimes they're innovative. They're the MacGyvers in the group. But we've just seen extraordinary things happen because we didn't predetermine leadership with a lot of our events. And those people have gone on, and it's like, I just never had the opportunity, or I didn't think anybody would let me do it. So we're getting close to the end here, folks, but the next session is, I just want to go back and give you there is actually some theory behind this, real theory behind all of this work. And one of the things that I want to talk about is this creative tension model. So creative tension is about how we decide to do things, how communities decide to solve problems. And there's a whole host of background information that's actually in the resource thing that you can read up on this. But, we take a problem like there's school children hungry on the weekend. So what do we immediately decide to do? We're going to give them food. Because that's what we got to do. I mean, Jane said to us today they're handing out 2,500 food boxes a month at the food bank over there, their new food bank.
Right here now.
Right here in Alexandria. So we're going to solve this by handing people food. Well, the reality is that going to solve this long term? And backpacks are like my least favorite way of solving anything because they're awful. But that's our immediate, that's reactive. We're going to do that. And we're doing the same thing with homelessness in this country is, okay, you're homeless, we're going to put you in a shelter. But we can't keep you in a shelter. We only have so many shelter beds, and we can only keep you in a shelter for so long, and so on and so forth. So we have a reactive orientation, and it's emotional. We have the emotional thing. We're going to feed them. And then we're going to focus on what we don't want. We don't want kids to go without food. And we solve problems. We do problem solving, and the result is a backpack program. And our work is really about taking that cultural tension and saying, how do we have vision for a long-term focus and going in a creative direction. And yes, sometimes we have to do that immediate thing because it's just we feel it's necessary, or we don't have any other way to do it. But if we don't have to, or we need to at the same time say, wait, we've got to have a broader vision here. We got to think long term. And that's really where we are at Oregon Food Bank, is about changing from that short-term hand out the food to how do we help people have food, the food today piece, turning it into the food tomorrow piece and the food for everybody piece. So we seeking community input, focusing on what we really want to create, which is long-term, renewable, family-focused. Because one of the problems for me, that backpack program, having been homeless and having been in a situation where I didn't have food for my kids, or struggled to have food for my kids, one of the things that would have absolutely killed me was to make my child responsible for their own food. Because you change the dynamic of a family when you do that. When you hand kids a backpack, you've changed the family dynamic. Yeah?
When I was growing up,
what we did in our neighborhood, what my father and his friends did in their neighborhood, they would go and purchase a cow, and they would divide it up.
You're right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, that's what happened.
Yeah,
I know Inglewood actually does something similar with the Berkshire pigs,
Oh,
so
really?
yeah, you can buy a share, and Butterfield Farms
yeah.
out of South Grant Parish will do, you can buy a share.
Mhm.
Yeah, sure can.
And, you know, and just getting certain families to realize, you know, we go $100 a piece and we get a half a
Yep.
cow and you get, you know,
Right,
just
right.
divide it up.
Yeah. So I have a ton of backpack program stories that I won't tell you, but some of them absolutely horrified me when I'm told, oh, but their parents are drug addicts, so we have to give them the backpacks. And then they go on to tell me how the kids have to hide the food, and it's just like, yeah. So it's like, so you've really solved a problem here? Really? You really solved that problem. So focusing on if we are creative in the way we do solutions, and we seek community input, and we're looking longer term, and we focus on what we want to create, which is food security. And then we think about a community garden or a kitchen where we can prepare meals collectively or something like that. Then we've got a generative orientation, and kids are getting fed, but they're going to get fed a lot more long term. So just when you're thinking about problems, this is a good way. And like I said, there's a much longer explanation of this in your packets. But this is really, I mean, I think I've always been in that upper piece where I had vision. And you were talking about ways, my dad always raised a huge garden. He farmed, but he always had these enormous gardens. And my brother and I would moan and groan about working in the garden. But then when my dad started, because it was way more food than we needed, but you know, my dad knew where that food went, where it needed to be. And he always delivered it. He'd always take baskets of food, and it was delivered to people's doorsteps. And if he could deliver it when they weren't home, that was his best plan. But his second plan was if they were there, he'd go, this is way too much. My mother's name was Reen. This is way too much for Reen to take care of. Can you help us?
Right.
It wasn't, here, I know you need some food. It's, can you help us by not letting this food go to waste?
Well,
And
what we did, I was programmed the after school program in Texas. We volunteered at the local food bank, and we would take at nighttime.
mhm,
And for every hour we put in, we got 10 pounds of food.
mhm,
So the children knew when they volunteered, and we had kids' kitchens, so we cooked for them every day.
yeah.
But that's the way we was able to guarantee that they had healthy meals every day.
But they could feel good about that. That wasn't handed to them. They could feel good about that. Yeah. That's the reason I love our gleaning programs, is because it's community-based food empowerment. And because it's, people teach each other about how to use the food. You know, and the seniors who can't go out and actually participate in this, they actually spend a lot of time teaching people. You know, they'll share their stories. And I've had them where we'd have 17, 18-year-old moms of kids sitting with an 80-year-old grandma teaching them how to preserve food. You know, it changes the dynamic because it's all community-based. This is from Iowa State University. Have you ever seen this before, the social capitals? Community capitals framework. So this is just another way of thinking about how a community comes together, and it's a way of, and there's tons of information on this on the internet, but I share this with people because you can sit down and map. I talked about mapping your food system. So you can think about in all of these places, what is it, you know, like what's the natural capital that you have? What's the cultural capital that you have? What's the human capital that you have? What are the social capitals, political capitals? Like, who is it that's going to be good on, you know, who's going to support what you're doing? What institutions are going to contribute financially? what's the build capital? You've got a church with a kitchen. You know, what can you do with that? You know, that kind of thing. And all of those things can contribute to that healthy ecosystem and a vital economy and social well-being. And in truth, individuals could sit down and actually map their capitals in this way too. But I always want to introduce this to people. This is part of this is a group in the Midwest of extension folks who have worked together on this community capitals framework. And if you're more interested in that, there's tons of that information out there on the internet.
And I'll make sure to have this PowerPoint on Basecamp so y'all can see that slide.
Right. And then collective impact. Are you guys talking collective impact down here?
Sounds almost,
John, is it?
Sounds very close. It's similar to cooperative. Just kidding.
Well, this is
But
like,
we're not. We need
okay,
to
your
talk.
funders are not talking collective impact?
They're not using that. No,
I'm in shock.
No. No.
Okay. Then I don't know that I even want to talk about it.
No, please do.
So collective impact is the idea. So it's about getting rid of community competition around. It's about reducing community competition around this. We're using a collective impact model in Oregon for our community food systems network. So we have backbone organizations, which in Oregon, it's Oregon State and Oregon Food Bank are the backbone organizations. And then because we have all of these organizations, and of course they're competing for funding, what we're trying to do is find ways to not have it be a competition, but actually working together, and then to have common goals and have common indicators so that we can report out on this work and actually share activities so that they're mutually reinforcing.
Yeah, this would be really helpful if funders were focused on stuff like this in Central Louisiana with this goal in mind.
I'm in shock because this is,
Right. Yeah. 'Cause that's
I mean,
what-
even
that's the
Feeding
mindset
America
we
is
have.
using this collective impact modeling.
Yeah.
Um,
That's the biggest problem you're gonna have in Central Louisiana,
Yeah,
is people
yeah.
wanting to hoard what they have and not share.
Which
Well,
is-
this is about changing that.
Yeah.
Well, which is very proud of the area you're in right now. This, and I mean, literally, this microcosm you're in right now is a very unusual.
Unusual.
animal, yeah.
Well, I'm not surprised, but setting a common agenda, setting common progress measures, and then the communications piece is huge. So everybody communicating and being honest and upfront about what they're doing. And so that everybody, you know, we're going to apply for such and such. How can we all work together? Is there collaboration here? Makes a huge difference. And then having backbone organizations like CLETA to bring all that together is really important.
Yeah, if we thought even of our food policy council, of our working group as kind of one of those backbone organizations,
Mhm.
or this group.
Yeah.
When I worked, when I worked for the Rapides Foundation, they were just getting into that mindset. Because what we found is that we had several organizations all doing the same thing, but none of them were working together.
Right.
And they were all being funded pretty
Right.
much by the same person. It's like, why are we wasting our time doing exactly what you're doing?
And
Why don't we
efforts and
divide and
resources and
conquer?
everything, yeah.
Yeah.
So they were looking at it and working on it, but they just didn't call it that.
Okay.
It's definitely, they're in the baby stage of it, I think so, around here. They're just realizing.
Well, they'll come to it because all the other foundations are. I mean, our foundations in Oregon, this is another interesting piece, which is being a shocker for our regional food banks and some of our less progressive food banks. They actually have said to us, you know, we used to give, foundations that gave us $500,000 a year to purchase food now say, we've been given that forever. You didn't solve hunger. We're not giving you that anymore to just buy food. Come to us with something else. And that's, I mean, this is the something else.
It seems like that first piece of having the common agenda and the common goal is it's the first piece of who comes to the table for the
Right.
collective impact.
Yes. Yeah, it is. There are communities that are doing this around, and there are whole states that are doing this around high school graduation and using the collective impact model.
Right.
And they have indicators that are about how many kids graduate and how many go on to college. I mean, some of these efforts only have 2 indicators. I mean, but the activities behind those indicators, like graduation and going to college, are massive. How do they move them to that? But they'll only have 2 indicators. That's their indicators. There's groups in the Northeast that have done it around reducing childhood obesity. And there are pros and cons to it, but it's a really good framework for true collaboration because it takes away the competition piece. So, things we've learned. It's really important to judge community readiness and make sure people are really ready to move forward. And I've worked, like I said, I've worked as long as 2 years with a community before I thought it was time. I'll have people come to me and there's one person in a group or a community and they're really passionate, but they can't bring 5 more people to the table. They're not ready to go. When they can put 5 or 6 or 7 people at the table to talk to me about doing whatever it is, then it's time. Then we're probably going to get 15 or 20 people to come to an event, or 30 or whatever. You have to have active community leadership. So building those leadership teams and it not being a one-person event is really important when we're doing stuff, no matter what it is. And as I said, chaos is okay. Events can be chaotic. That's fine. Creativity surfaces out of chaos. You need to adapt to communities. So we have a set agenda that we use for these things, or a model or a framework, but we adapt it to communities. And like I said, somebody called me up and said, can we do this around homelessness? Or even with here in Louisiana, when we talked about it, you guys have done a ton of work around food system stuff. So how do we start from what you've done and move to the next step? And in some places, there's nothing has happened, and so we start with that framework. So we're always adapting. Or we want to save the local grocery store, we need to adapt our process to saving the local grocery store. And example of what we did with that was, number one, we needed to know who needed to come to our meeting to know, our original organizing meeting to know we'd be successful. So we sat down and we made a list, and we had like 100 people on the list. In a community of 210 people, we had 100 different people on the list that included like county commissioners and things like that. At the end of the evening, we had 70 of those people come to the event. And another 10 of the key people we had on the list had somehow or another been in touch with us that day. So we knew what success was. We knew that we had hit all the right places. And you know, preparing that kind of thing, really thinking through who needs to be in the room. Manageable group size is important when you're doing meetings. But I just said I did an event that was 110 people by myself. That was interesting. But it helps if you have manageable group sizes, or if you make sure you've got enough people to help you manage it. And that doesn't mean they're going to run the meeting, but they're going to help you herd the cats. We really have seen value out of spontaneous leadership. And making sure the group is responsible for the process. You as facilitator are not responsible for the whole process. the group's responsible. So you tell them what you're doing ahead of time, you keep reminding them, and then you tell them what you accomplished at the end of the event.
The group is, that's the participants.
Participants, whatever group it is, they're responsible. And then you always want to do some kind of evaluation, whether it's written or oral or whatever it is, because you need to know, you need to be able to judge later about whether or not you succeeded. So you have to, and this is just at the end of the day, community-driven process equals community-driven outcomes. So that's sort of the end of what I have to say about community organizing.